Ex-wife approached the ex-husband at the courthouse steps until a missing witness stepped out for her. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main characters. It was a day that neither Sarah Johnson nor James Miller could have predicted. The sun hung high above the courthouse, casting long shadows over the steps, where two former spouses were about to cross paths once again. Sarah stood at the top of the courthouse steps, her heart racing. She hadn't seen James in years. Their bitter divorce had been finalized long ago, but the scars were still there, hidden beneath the surface. Sarah had moved on, or so she thought, but something had been nagging at her for weeks. Today, she needed answers, and the courthouse, of all places, seemed like the only place she could confront him. Below her, James was walking out of the building, his expression unreadable. He had been inside for hours, attending the latest round of hearings in a long and exhausting legal battle. He looked up, catching sight of Sarah. Their eyes met for a split second before he quickly looked away, his jaw tightening. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been dreading, yet also longing for. She had something to say, something important, something that had been building up inside her for far too long. She took a deep breath and began walking down the steps, her heels clicking against the stone, each step bringing her closer to the man who had once been her husband. James, she called out, her voice steady but filled with emotion. James stopped in his tracks, clearly surprised to hear her voice after all this time. He turned slowly to face her, his eyes narrowing slightly. What do you want, Sarah? His voice was cold, distant. I'm not here to fight, James, she replied, trying to keep her composure. I just need to talk to you. It's about the case. His face twisted in frustration. You still think that's the reason we're standing here? His voice rose slightly. That's all it's ever been with you, hasn't it? Always about the case, always about winning. Sarah winced, feeling the weight of his words, but she couldn't back down now. It's not just about the case, she said softly. It's about what happened to us, what happened to you, what happened to me. I need closure, James. And I think you owe me that. James hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty for a brief moment before his usual mask of indifference returned. I don't owe you anything, Sarah, he muttered, looking away. We're done. Sarah felt the sting of his words, but she refused to let him brush her off. She stepped closer, her voice firm. You might think we're done, but I'm not finished yet. I've got something you need to hear, and you're going to listen. Just as she took another step forward, a man's voice cut through the tension. Hold on a second. The voice was familiar, but it didn't register immediately. From the corner of her eye, Sarah saw a figure stepping out from behind a nearby pillar. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a familiar face. It was Michael Harris, the missing witness she had been desperately searching for. The one who could change everything. She froze. James, too, turned, his expression shifting to one of disbelief. You. James started, his voice thick with confusion and anger. What the hell is he doing here? Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't expected Michael to show up like this, not in front of James, not in front of everyone. But here he was, and everything was about to change. Sarah's heart raced as she stood face to face with Michael Harris, the man who had the power to change everything. James, still stunned, seemed to be grappling with the sudden appearance of the missing witness. His eyes flickered between Sarah and Michael, disbelief written all over his face. What is this? What's going on, Sarah? James demanded, his voice tight with frustration. Michael, standing tall and calm, took a step forward, his gaze fixed on James. I think it's time we settle this once and for all, Michael said, his tone steady, yet heavy with the weight of the truth. Sarah swallowed hard, feeling the tension in the air thicken. She had been waiting for this moment for so long, yet standing here now, with everything on the line, she couldn't help but feel a surge of nervousness. James' expression remained cold, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He turned to Sarah, his voice almost a whisper. You planned this, didn't you? You brought him here to try to ruin me, didn't you? Sarah shook her head, her voice calm but firm. No, James. I didn't plan anything. Michael has the answers we both need. He's been gone for too long, and now he's here to help us both see the truth. James scoffed, clearly unconvinced. The truth? You think bringing him here is going to change anything? This is just another game to you, isn't it? Sarah's eyes locked onto his, her determination unwavering. No, James. This is about justice. This is about ending the lies and moving forward, whether you like it or not. Michael stepped closer to them, his presence commanding attention. I know you've been wondering why I disappeared, why I didn't testify before. The truth is I was hiding. Hiding from fear. But now I'm here to do what's right. James' brows furrowed, his confusion evident. Hiding? From what? From me? Michael's gaze softened for a moment, but he didn't flinch. Not from you, James. From the truth. Sarah looked at Michael, nodding slightly, encouraging him to continue. Michael took a deep breath before continuing. The truth is, I have information that both of you need to hear. Information that could change everything about the case, about your lives. James took a step back, his jaw tightening as he processed Michael's words. This is ridiculous, he muttered, clearly struggling with the situation. You think some missing witness is going to make a difference now? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, but it was filled with conviction. Yes, James. This could change everything. This is the final piece we've been missing. The air between them was thick with anticipation. Sarah could feel the weight of the moment settling around them. The courthouse steps, once a place of finality for many, now felt like the stage for a dramatic turning point. James stood there, his mind racing as he processed the gravity of Michael's revelation. For the first time in years, Sarah could see a crack in his armor. Could this be the moment that changed everything? Would James finally hear the truth and stop running from the past? Or would he continue to live in denial, unwilling to face the reality that was standing before him? The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of passing cars and the soft rustling of the courthouse doors. Sarah's heart was pounding in her chest as she waited for James to respond, her eyes fixed on him, praying that he would finally see reason. Michael stood beside her, ready to speak again, but Sarah could feel the tension in the air. The past was never far from their minds, but today, it seemed like they might finally have the chance to let it go. Would the truth finally come out? And would it be enough to heal the wounds that had festered for so long? Sarah held her breath, waiting for James' reaction. The silence between them stretched out, heavy and thick, each passing second feeling like an eternity. Michael stood beside her, his arms crossed, his expression calm, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw. He was ready to speak, ready to reveal the truth, but he held back, letting James process the gravity of the situation. Finally, James spoke, his voice low and guarded. You think this will change anything, don't you? He said, his eyes flicking between Sarah and Michael. You think this missing witness is some kind of magic fix for your little game? Sarah's heart sank, but she stood firm. She knew that what Michael had to say was important, and she couldn't let James dismiss it so easily. It's not a game, James, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. This is real. This is the truth, and it's something we both need to hear. We've been living in the shadows of our past for too long. James scoffed, but Sarah could see the frustration building in his eyes. The truth? He muttered. I don't think you know what the truth is, Sarah. You've always twisted things to fit your own narrative. Sarah flinched, but she refused to back down. You don't get to decide what the truth is, James, she replied. We both deserve to know, and it's time for you to stop running from it. Michael stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Sarah's right, he said, his tone quiet but insistent. The truth matters, whether you like it or not. I've been hiding for far too long, but I'm here now, and I'm ready to tell you everything. James' eyes darted to Michael, narrowing with suspicion. Tell me everything? You think I'm just going to believe whatever story you've cooked up? Michael didn't flinch. No. But I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to listen. The weight of his words seemed to sink in. For a moment, James stood still, his gaze flicking between Sarah and Michael. His face was a mask of uncertainty and anger, but there was something else there, something deeper, buried beneath the surface. What is it? He finally asked, his voice a little softer, though still laced with skepticism. Michael took a deep breath, steadying himself. The truth about your case. The truth about what happened all those years ago. I know what you've been hiding, James. I know why this whole thing has been dragging on for so long. Sarah held her breath, praying that James would finally listen. Michael was the key to everything, the missing link that could change the entire course of the case, and their lives. James took a step back, his mind clearly racing as he processed Michael's words. You think you can just waltz in here and spill all these secrets? James asked, his tone almost mocking. You think that's going to make a difference now? Michael's face remained calm. Yes, he said simply. Because the truth always makes a difference. It may not change everything immediately, but it changes the future. And it starts here, with you. Sarah watched as the words sunk in, the tension in the air thickening with every passing moment. James stood frozen, his mind clearly at war with himself. Was he ready to confront the past, to face the truth that had been buried for so long? Or would he continue to hide behind the lies and the anger that had defined his life for years? The silence between them stretched on, and Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that this was the moment of reckoning. It wasn't just about the case anymore. It was about their future, their chance for closure, for healing. And it was up to James whether or not they would ever get that chance. James stood there, frozen, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. He had spent so long running from the truth, burying his past beneath layers of anger and resentment. Now here it was, laid bare before him, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. The courthouse steps, once a place of finality, had now become a battlefield of emotions, with each of them fighting their own internal wars. Sarah stood tall beside Michael, her expression resolute, her heart beating in her chest. She knew that this moment was crucial, not just for the case, but for the closure she had been desperately searching for. She needed James to understand that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. The silence between them stretched longer, as if the world itself was waiting for James to make a decision. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thick with uncertainty. And what exactly do you think this will accomplish? He asked, glancing at Michael, then at Sarah. You think you can just waltz in here, drop some bombshell, and everything will magically fix itself? Michael met his gaze evenly. It's not about fixing anything, James. It's about facing what happened and accepting it. That's the first step toward moving on. Sarah nodded, her eyes pleading with him. You've been running from this for so long. It's time to stop. For both our sakes. James looked away, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. His jaw tightened as he processed their words. You think I don't know that? He muttered. You think I don't want to move on? The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, but there was also a flicker of pain behind his words. Michael took a step forward, his voice softer now. Then let us help you. Let us all move forward together. We can't do that if you keep hiding from the truth. James remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ground. He didn't want to hear this, didn't want to confront the mistakes he had made, the things he had buried deep inside. But something about Michael's words made him pause, made him reconsider. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure what to do next. The world around him seemed to blur as memories of the past, of Sarah, of the mistakes, of the endless fighting, came flooding back. The weight of those years, of all the lies, was starting to pressed down on him. He felt trapped in his own head, unable to move forward, unable to let go of the past. Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, soft yet firm. I know it's hard, James. I know you're scared. But it's time to stop running. It's time to face what happened. For us, for everything we've been through. The words struck him harder than he expected, and for a moment, he almost felt a flicker of something deep inside, a sense of guilt, of responsibility, maybe even of hope. He lifted his eyes to meet Sarah's, his expression conflicted, torn between the fear of facing the truth and the desperate need to finally put it all behind him. And what if I'm not ready? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I never am? Michael's reply was gentle but firm. You don't have to be ready, James. You just have to be willing. The simplicity of those words hung in the air like a lifeline. Sarah took a small step forward, her eyes never leaving his. This is our chance, James. Don't let it slip away. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words, the weight of their past hovering between them. James took a deep breath, the sound heavy in his chest, as if the very act of breathing had become a struggle. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he knew that facing the truth was the only way to move forward. He looked at Sarah and Michael, his resolve hardening. All right, he said finally, his voice steady. Let's hear it. Let's hear what you have to say. James took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had made the decision to listen, but as Michael prepared to speak, the reality of it all began to sink in. He knew that the truth could be the beginning of something new, but it could also shatter everything he had worked to protect. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how far you tried to run. All right, he said, his voice steady, though there was a hint of uncertainty in it. Let's hear it. Let's hear what you have to say. Michael nodded, stepping forward, his gaze never leaving James. He had been quiet for so long, but now, with everything on the line, the time had come to speak the words that had been hidden for years. It's not an easy thing to admit, James. Michael began, his voice low, measured. But the truth is, you've been living a lie. All these years, you've believed one thing, and it's not the reality. Not the way you think. James narrowed his eyes, a flicker of anger flashing across his face. What are you talking about? He demanded, though his voice wavered slightly, betraying his confusion. Michael glanced at Sarah briefly, then turned back to James. You've always thought the case was about the money, the property, the things you could lose. But that's not the heart of it. The heart of it is something much deeper, something that goes back to the very reason you and Sarah split in the first place. Sarah's heart pounded as Michael's words hung in the air. She had always known there was more to their divorce than just the surface issues. The lies, the secrets, they had festered beneath the surface for so long, and now it was all coming to light. What are you saying? James's voice was tight, and his jaw clenched as if he was preparing for the worst. Michael took another breath, his eyes never leaving James. Sarah didn't just leave you because of the marriage. She left because of something you did, something you didn't even realize was happening. Something that changed everything. You've been blinded by your own pride, by your own need to be in control. Sarah could feel the tension in the air, her hands trembling slightly as she waited for James to process the words. She had waited for this moment for so long, but hearing Michael speak the truth aloud made everything feel even more real. James looked stunned, his face pale as he took in Michael's words. What did I do? He whispered, almost to himself, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Michael's voice softened. You ignored her. You pushed her away when she needed you the most. And when she tried to reach out, to tell you what was happening, you didn't listen. You thought you knew better, that everything was fine. But it wasn't. It never was. The words hit James like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He could feel his chest tightening, the weight of regret and guilt threatening to consume him. Sarah watched him, her eyes full of empathy, but there was a sadness there too. She had hoped for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what would come next. "You don't understand," James finally said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. I never knew she felt that way." Michael's expression softened, but there was no pity in his eyes, only a quiet understanding. "That's the point, James. You never listened. You never saw her. You only saw what you wanted to see." The silence that followed was heavy, as if the world had paused to let the truth settle in. James stood there, his mind racing, his emotions spiraling out of control. He didn't know how to process the pain, the guilt, the realization that he had been blind to everything around him. Sarah took a small step closer to him, her voice soft but firm. "It's not too late, James," she said gently. "You can still make things right. But it starts with facing what happened." James's eyes were wet with unshed tears as he finally looked at her, his expression breaking. He had been so sure of his own truth for so long, but now, in this moment, he realized how wrong he had been. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. Sarah didn't know if it was enough, but it was a start. A start toward healing, toward moving forward. For the first time in years, James was willing to face the truth. And that, in itself, was something they could both build on. James stood still for a moment, his mind swirling with everything that had just been said. He had always believed that the pieces of his life, the ones that didn't fit, were just coincidences, things that didn't matter. But now, with Michael's words hanging heavily in the air, he couldn't ignore the truth that had always been right in front of him. He felt the weight of everything he had missed, the years of his marriage that had slipped away without him even noticing. He had thought that he was doing everything right, that his actions were justified. But now he saw that he had been blind. His chest tightened as he turned to Sarah, the guilt and regret surging through him. "I never knew, Sarah," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I never knew how much I hurt you. I thought everything was fine. But I see now that it wasn't." Sarah's heart ached as she looked at him. She had heard the words, had felt the years of pain and misunderstanding between them, but hearing him finally admit it out loud was something different. It was raw. It was real. And it was the first step toward healing. "It wasn't fine, James," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "We both knew it wasn't. I tried to tell you, but you were never really listening." James nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in deeper with every passing second. "I thought I was doing what was best for us," he said, the regret evident in his eyes. "But I was too focused on what I wanted, on what I thought was right. I pushed you away, and I pushed everything that mattered away." Michael, who had been silent throughout this exchange, stepped forward. His eyes were filled with understanding, but there was no judgment. "The thing is, James," he said quietly, "the past is already written. What matters now is what you do with this moment. You can't change what happened, but you can change what comes next." James turned to him, his face etched with uncertainty. "What if it's too late?" he asked. "What if I've already lost everything?" Michael shook his head. "It's never too late. You have a choice, James. We all do. You can choose to face the truth, to acknowledge it, and to move forward. Or you can choose to stay where you are, stuck in the past, carrying that weight with you forever." Sarah watched as James processed Michael's words. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle to let go of the pride and fear that had controlled him for so long. He had spent years trying to outrun his mistakes, but now, in this moment, he had the opportunity to change. Slowly, James took a deep breath and straightened up, the weight of his guilt still heavy on his shoulders but now accompanied by a flicker of hope. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, his voice steady. "But I know that I can't keep living in the shadows of my past. I need to face it, to make things right, for both of us." Sarah's heart lifted, a small, cautious hope blossoming in her chest. She had spent so long waiting for this moment, for James to see the truth. But now that it was happening, she realized it wasn't just about the past. It was about the future, about the possibility of moving forward, together or apart. I can't promise that everything will be perfect, she said softly. But I can promise that if we take this step, if we face the truth, we'll at least have a chance at something real. James nodded, his gaze steady now. I'm ready to take that step, he said, the conviction in his voice stronger than she had ever heard. I want to try. For both of us. Michael watched the exchange with quiet approval, then gave a small nod. Then that's all anyone can ask for, he said. Taking the first step is the hardest part. The rest will follow in time. The three of them stood there on the courthouse steps, the past still looming over them but no longer holding them back. For the first time in years, they all felt like they were standing at the edge of something new. And while the future was uncertain, they knew that they had taken the first step towards something better. Together or apart, the journey forward was theirs to make. The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah and James. They had taken the first step, yes, but the road ahead still seemed daunting. Despite their conversation, the weight of the past didn't vanish overnight. It lingered in the quiet moments, in the awkward silences, and in the small, hesitant steps they both took toward healing. Sarah found herself replaying their conversation over and over in her mind. She had always wanted James to admit the truth, to see the damage that had been done, but now that he had, she wasn't sure where to go from here. It was one thing to talk about facing the past, but another to actually live it. James, too, was struggling with the aftermath. He had opened up in a way he never thought he would, but the reality of it hit him hard. He felt like a stranger in his own life, disconnected from the person he used to be. Every corner of his world seemed to remind him of the mistakes he had made. But there was also a flicker of hope within him, a small but growing realization that maybe, just maybe, things didn't have to stay broken. He had finally acknowledged the truth, and that, at least, was a start. One evening, Sarah found herself sitting in the living room, staring out the window. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about the life she had once shared with James, the way things used to be before everything fell apart. They had been happy once, hadn't they? But time had a way of eroding even the strongest foundations. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. She looked down at the screen. It was James. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? She said, her voice soft. Sarah, it's me. James's voice came through, a little rough, as if he had been struggling with his own thoughts. I've been thinking about everything, about us, and I want to talk. I don't know where this is going, but I think we need to talk. Sarah closed her eyes for a brief moment. She had waited for this call, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to expect. Okay, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. When? Can we meet tomorrow? He asked. I just need to. I need to figure things out, and I think we need to be in the same place to do that. Sarah felt a mix of emotions, hope, apprehension, and uncertainty. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew that they had to talk, had to confront what they both felt. All right, she said finally. Tomorrow works. The next day, they met at a small cafe in the city. The familiar sight of James was both comforting and foreign to Sarah. He looked different somehow, older, wearier, but also more present. When he saw her, he gave a small, hesitant smile, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But they both knew better. They sat down at a table in the corner, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, almost oppressive, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if they were both waiting for the other to say something to take the next step. Finally, James broke the silence. I've been thinking a lot about what Michael said, he began, his voice quieter than usual. And about everything we've been through. I don't have all the answers, but I know that I want to try. I want to try to be better, to be someone you can trust again. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Sarah listened to his words, feeling a mixture of relief and doubt. She had waited so long to hear him say this, but now that he had, it didn't feel like the end of the journey. It felt like the beginning of something new, something uncertain. She took a deep breath before speaking. I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off, James. The damage is done. But maybe we can start fresh. One step at a time. James nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm willing to do that, he said softly. I just want a chance. A chance to show you that I'm sorry. That I can be different. Sarah felt the weight of the moment, the shift in the air between them. It wasn't the promise of a perfect future, but it was a step towards something real. It was a chance to rebuild, to forgive, not just him, but herself, too. All right, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Let's take that first step then. As they left the cafe, there was no grand declaration, no sweeping gesture. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like they were on the right path, however uncertain it might be. The road ahead was still unclear, but they had chosen to walk it together. And that was enough for now. The days following their meeting at the cafe passed with a sense of quiet anticipation. Sarah and James had agreed to take things one step at a time, but that simple promise seemed to carry so much weight. They didn't rush things, didn't force conversations. Instead, they let the moments unfold naturally, allowing themselves the space to rebuild what had been lost. For Sarah, the hardest part was not knowing what the future held. She had always prided herself on being in control, on having a clear path ahead. But now, she had to learn to embrace uncertainty. The old habits, the old ways of thinking, didn't serve her anymore. She had to adapt. James, too, was trying to find his footing. He was still grappling with the guilt of his past actions, but he was committed to changing, to being someone Sarah could trust again. He started doing small things, showing up on time, listening when she spoke, asking how her day had been. These simple gestures, though small, spoke volumes. For the first time in years, he wasn't just going through the motions. He was fully present. One afternoon, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, when James walked in. He had that familiar look in his eyes, the one she used to know so well, the look of someone trying to find the right words. He stood by the door for a moment, watching her, before he spoke. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sarah set her coffee down, her gaze softening. "Of course. What's on your mind?" James took a seat across from her, his hands folded in front of him. "I've been thinking a lot about the past few weeks," he began. "About what we talked about. And I realize now that I never really appreciated what you were going through. I always thought I was the one who had it hard, but I was blind to how much you were carrying." His words caught her off guard. She had heard him admit his mistakes before, but there was something different in his tone now. It wasn't just an apology. It was an understanding, a recognition of how deep their issues had gone. "James," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly, "it's not just about the past. It's about how we move forward. We can't change what happened, but we can decide what we do next. We have to choose every day." He nodded, his expression serious. "I know. And I'm ready to choose. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right." Sarah looked at him, her heart heavy but hopeful. "It won't be easy, James. It never is. But I'm willing to try. I just need to know that you're in this with me for real. No more running away. No more pretending." There was a long pause as James absorbed her words. Then, slowly, he reached across the table and took her hand in his. "I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." The simple gesture, his hand in hers, was enough to fill the silence between them with a quiet promise. They weren't there yet. They hadn't fixed everything. But they had started. And that was enough for now. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to evolve. They spent more time together, talked more openly about their feelings, and worked through the unresolved issues that had plagued them for so long. There were still tough moments, still times when the weight of the past threatened to pull them under. But they faced them together, with the understanding that healing was a process. Slowly, Sarah began to let go of the anger and bitterness that had held her captive for so long. She found it hard at times, especially when memories of the past resurfaced, but she knew it was necessary. She couldn't move forward if she kept holding on to everything that had hurt her. As for James, he kept his word. He was there, every step of the way. The small acts of kindness and patience became more consistent. He apologized when necessary, listened when she spoke, and showed her, through his actions, that he was truly committed to making things work. One evening, after a long day, they sat together on the couch, watching a movie. The soft glow of the screen illuminated their faces, but it was the quiet between them that spoke the loudest. There was no need for words in that moment. They were simply present with each other. It was a small moment, but it was enough. It was a sign that they were moving in the right direction. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah and James knew they were on it together. Months passed, and though Sarah and James knew the journey wasn't over, they had come a long way from where they started. The tension that had once defined their relationship had softened. There were still moments of doubt, still days when the past seemed too heavy to bear, but they were learning to carry it together. Their conversations became more honest, more open. They talked about things they had never discussed before: fears, hopes, dreams for the future. Slowly, Sarah found herself trusting again, something she hadn't thought possible for a long time. James, too, was changing. He wasn't the same man who had walked away from their marriage years ago. He was more patient, more attentive. He knew that actions spoke louder than words, and every day, he showed Sarah that he was committed to the person he was becoming. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Sarah realized just how far they had come. It had been a quiet day, nothing extraordinary. They were simply sharing a cup of coffee, enjoying the peaceful silence that had once seemed so foreign to them. But in that moment, Sarah felt a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in years. She looked at James, who was reading the paper, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like there was an elephant in the room. There was no lingering tension, no unsaid words. It was just them, here and now. She smiled to herself, the weight of the past slowly lifting from her shoulders. "James," she said quietly, breaking the silence. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that still took her by surprise. "Yeah? I'm glad we're here," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. He set the paper down, his gaze never leaving hers. "Me too," he replied, his voice low. "It's been a long road, but I think we're on the right path." There was a sense of peace in his words, a sincerity that made her heart swell. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. "I never thought I'd get here," she admitted, her voice shaking just a little. "I thought the pain would never go away. But I'm starting to believe that it can. That we can start over." James reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We don't need to start over, Sarah. We've built something real, something worth holding on to. We've just got to keep moving forward." His words struck a chord deep within her. They weren't erasing the past, they were learning from it, growing from it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. "I'm ready for that," she said softly. They sat in the quiet for a while, simply holding hands, knowing that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but that they were no longer alone. They had come this far, and together, they would continue to take each step, trusting in the process, trusting in each other. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Sarah felt hopeful. It wasn't perfect. Life wasn't perfect. But they had each other, and that was all they needed to move forward.